Notre Dame's mascot, the Fighting Leprechaun, is deemed offensive and is targeted for removal by social justice warriors. In a related story, the Lucky Charms mascot is fighting cancel culture by declaring that he is actually a gender-fluid queer butch lesbian who is in a sadomasochistic polyamorous transhuman throuple with Snap from Rice Krispies and Toucan Sam. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We are that one, that only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around le monde. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% when you visit it and use our access code DRDUKE. If you were educated in the public schools, that spells out Dr. Duke. Support us by supporting MyPillow. Today we start in the land of the Irish and the home of the green, apparently, Notre Dame. It didn't, the former mayor of South Bend is Pete Buttigieg, isn't he? The booty boy himself. Notre Dame, after the school's mascot was recently called out for being, quote, one of the most offensive in all of college sports. But Notre Dame is fighting back. Rudy, Rudy, Rudy.
Wow. You have so many pop culture references
and Rudy
today.
is Frodo.
Oh,
Frodo.
You have to tie it back to that.
Combine them. Fruity, fruity, fruity.
This is what I'm dealing with every day.
Taters.
You only have to deal with it for like a half hour. I have to deal with it
Taters.
all day. All day. Now, there's a new survey from Quality Logo Products. And they found that the leprechaun was the fourth most offensive college football mascot in all of the U.S. because he's a fighting Irish leprechaun. The Dukes Up Irish mythical character are ranked just behind Florida State University's Osceola and Renegade, San Diego State's Aztec Warrior, and University of Hawaii at Manoa's Vili the Warrior. Would it be Vili the Warrior? All of which are considered insensitive to Native American communities.
Now take a look at that picture real quick.
This is a different previous one. So these are the 10 worst according to another survey.
But now look at this. They're all the ones that they hate are white men. Let's just start with that. You've got Pistol Pete, who's a man. Purdue Pete's a man. You got Vili the Warrior is a man. The Demon Deacon is a man. You've got Hey Reb, the Rebel is a man. They are all white men. I guarantee you, with the exception of Pistol Pete, how did Purdue Pete, an engineer, hurt the Native Americans? How did Demon Deacon, how did that hurt anybody? I mentioned Vili. He's actually not a white man. We know why they don't like him. They don't like Indians being appropriated, so they say. So, here's the hypocrisy of this. They always say things like, how would you like it if a white man was parodied? How would you like it if a white guy was stereotyped? Instead of the Washington Redskins, it was the Washington Palefaces. I would buy every piece of merchandise they sold. I would love to have a fat middle-aged guy sitting in a recliner eating Pringles as my mascot. I would finally be represented in the college world. Bring it on. Come on, let's do it. I'll be your poster guy.
Anyway, I think the Stanford tree, I tried just looking it up now, is just because it's the worst. It's a tree.
And why does the tree bother
It's
them?
Just tree. It's not the most offensive. It's the worst.
But why does it bother
tree,
them?
Because it's a tree and it's lame.
You would think that it's environmentally conscious, wouldn't you?
You would
It's
think.
environmentally conscious.
If someone out there knows and wants to put it in the comments, explain to us.
Why is the
haven't looked into
Stanford
that.
tree offensive?
Anyway, in an email that was sent to the newspapers, the Notre Dame officials wrote that it's worth noting that there is no comparison between Notre Dame's nickname and mascot and the Indian and Warrior names and mascots used by other institutions such as NFL team formerly known as the Washington Redskins.
I disagree. There is a relationship. They don't like white people, right? It's white people who did all the bad things to the Indians, and Irish people are white people. There is a connection, Notre Dame. You're trying to get off the hook, Notre Dame, by saying we're not making fun of Indians, leave us alone.
This is true. Now, they did give it a little history lesson, and I'm going to pass that little history lesson along to you about Fighting Irish and the mascot. Notre Dame said its nickname, Fighting Irish, began as a term used by other schools to mock its athletic teams. At the time, anti-Catholicism and anti-immigrant sentiments were strong. Because Notre Dame was largely populated by ethnic Catholics, mostly Irish, but also Germans, Italians, and Poles, the university was a natural target for ethnic slurs, it said. At one football game in 1899, Northwestern students, those ones in Illinois, chanted, "Kill the Fighting Irish," Notre Dame had said. As the school's football team gained national prominence in the early 1900s, journalists began to use the Fighting Irish phrase in their stories. Soon, Notre Dame supporters took it up, turning what once was an epithet into an in-your-face expression of triumph.
In other words, it's like taking the N-word and using it right, exactly. But here's a question I have, first of all, they call it ethnic Catholics. What the hell does that even mean? Catholicism is a religion, dude. It's not an ethnicity. There's no such thing as ethnic Catholics. Get over yourself with that. Number two, the leprechaun guy, right? The Fighting Irish. So really, because at a football game, the Northwestern fans were saying "kill the Irish." You mean they really think you act like that means they're going to round them up and kill them? Everything people shout at the opposing teams in college football would therefore have to be banned. Just saying "beat the Vols" or "stomp the Vols" when you're playing Tennessee, well, that's inciting to violence, isn't it? So overwrought we are with our. Somebody needs to bring the fainting couch back, because there are people. The 18th century fainting count. Let's all bring it back. We're all gasping and swooning and fainting over the latest Twitter that goes out. Good Lord, people, get over it.
Get off his lawn. The leprechaun, also the Fighting Irish nickname, with the leprechaun and all that, was made official in 1927 when University President Father Matthew Walsh, of Irish descent, adopted the name. And obviously that leprechaun is symbolic of the Fighting Irish and intentionally a caricature, noting that the character began as an English dig at the Irish people, which Irish Americans chose to use as a way to recognize the determination of the Irish people and symbolically the university's athletes.
You know what? The only way you could make that mascot more popular is to change the name, seriously, to the Drunken Irish. What seems like a slur, that you would sell 10 times as much merchandise, and it would be 10 times more popular if you did it. Just let it go, for God's sake, people. Look at what you did to the Indians, the Cleveland Indians. They are the Cleveland Guardians. What the hell does that mean? Nothing.
At James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, you have the usual. The white, Christian, cisgender, straight males are being oppressive. So, standard, every day. They're engaging in systematic subjugation, according to some people, of other social groups. And you must remember that James Madison hated factions and the destruction that they could do. So, naturally, that's what's happening.
I'm beating a dead horse, but give me one example about how Christian white men are subjugating people. Do they know what the word subjugate means? No. Do they understand what that means?
They don't know what anything means.
I just want one, before I die, one example how white Christian men are subjugating anybody. Please, send me evidence.
He needs a fainting couch. Now, again, James Madison hated factions, if you know anything about anything, and all the destruction they could do. So factions are telling all the other factions about what to think. We have the staff at James Madison University and student employees in charge of facilitating orientation for first-year students. This fall, being mandated training in which they learned about this so-called social injustice and inclusion. And so there was training videos. And these videos were seen by not only the people who they were intended for. The videos were hosted by Jessica Weed and Jennifer Iwerks, who defined oppression as the systematic subjugation of one social group by a more powerful social group for the social, economic, and political benefit of the more powerful social group.
Children, subjugation. Let's lay your cards on. I don't care if they're tarot cards. Let's lay them on the table, you hippies, and show me the evidence.
Well, here's the deal. You need to understand. You don't understand the terms we're working with. Maybe that's what it is. They know what they're talking about, but you don't. So I will tell you.
Explain. Yes,
I will explain it to
you share ovaries with them. So go ahead and explain it.
Do I though? That was a little tease, wasn't it? Now you're all thinking, what the heck? Anyway, you have to know about what it is to be a privileged person or an agent, or being an oppressed person. You're the target. So the privileged are defined as unearned social power accorded by the formal and informal institutions of society to all members of a dominant group at the expense of targeted groups. And you know that you are this person, you're the privileged, if you are male, cisgender, white, Christian, heterosexual, hetero-romantic, Western European, American, upper to middle class, thin or athletic build, able-bodied, or if you're between the ages of 30s to your early 50s.
Let's just talk about Islamic men for a second. They don't meet their victims, obviously, because they're not on this chart, right? They're victimized, not victims. In many parts of the world, you have Muslim men, like in Afghanistan right now, who are subjugating women, right? They are killing them. One woman didn't cook the proper breakfast, dinner, and she was murdered. You have these girls being slapped in the face, spit on, driven back into their houses. Women were told, "Do not set foot out of the house without a chaperone." The universities have had to turn away all those female students and send them home because of the Taliban. That's subjugation, and you excused it by saying only white men of European descent or American descent are capable of subjugation. You are subjugating the truth to your politically correct lies because you won't point out real examples of subjugation. You have to just smear and slur white, cisgendered, Christian men. You are frauds and charlatans.
Now, if you are saying to yourself, I'm not all those things, I'm some of the other things, that means obviously you're oppressed. But I'll give you the full list. It's quite long. You're oppressed if you are a woman, transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, black, Asian, Latinx, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, pagan, lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, homoromantic, aromantic, bi, panromantic, non-Western European, anywhere outside of America, working and lower class, overweight and underweight, as well as anyone with a physical, mental, emotional, learning disability, or below the age of 30 and older than 50.
So there you go.
That's the entire list.
And you've got Jews and Muslims listed together. What about the subjugation that goes on, or the attempted subjugation that goes on in those communities? What about that? Can you be so
coexist?
I guess what they're telling you can be both subjugator and victim at the same time, right? So take those constituents groups. If the Muslim oppresses the African, you've got two minority groups, and one is subjugating another. What do you do with that? Does it not exist? No, it does exist. We just won't talk about it because we're privileged, uterus-bearing white women who've been educated in universities, which basically means they're not too smart.
And of course, you must remember that this training that was being taught to these people were then supposed to be part of training for the first-year students. So if you're all excited to go to college this year at James Madison University, you're about to be inundated with all of this.
Yep.
And mom and dad, if you're excited about your kid finally going off to college for the first time, being a freshman, they're getting this too.
And I would argue it's a form of subjugation if what you tell all incoming freshmen, the only dangerous force in the world is white Christian men. If you lie to them about that, not only are you subjugating those men, you are painting a very dishonest picture of the world.
Now, as one of the trainers, Weed, she said the social spaces that we exist in have constructed diversity to mean something that is palatable to the majority, allowing them to never critically consider their role in society. Again, they're all getting this, but don't worry, the rest of the world, that's how we found out about this. After the training video was put out just for the training itself, student employees reportedly received an email instructing them to not share these materials with others. And thank you to whoever actually shared it, because at least now we know about it.
It's not subjugation to do something to innocent freshmen and then to lie about it and conceal it. That's not subjugation.
Now, unlike James Madison, Joseph Robinette Biden will not have a university named after him. And if he does...
I'm not so sure.
Maybe Delaware will switch.
I was going to say, Delaware Community College.
Probably.
Right? Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Joe University. Well, Addison Smith decided for campus reform to head on down to George Mason University to ask students, hey, what do you guys think about how Joe Biden's doing currently as president of the United States? And it's kind of interesting. The vast majority of the students who said they voted for or supported him kind of have a little bit of regret. I'm shocked at the regret part, not the voting for or supporting him. And, well, let's just listen to what they have to say.
How do you think Biden has been doing so far?
Honestly, I think he's failed a lot on a lot of his promises.
He's not, maybe not the best.
He's not doing the best. He could definitely do better.
Just the general idea I've been hearing is a lot of bad things are coming up, but also I feel like we just have to be patient with how he's doing.
Do you think that we had a better quality of life a few years ago than we do now?
My quality of life personally, about the same. Gas prices could be lower.
Socially, everything's pretty similar. If not, some things are worse. Nothing's really better.
I'd say right now we're not as good as we were a few years ago.
And the way things are trending right now, would you vote for him again in 2024 for a second term? Are you likely to back him in 2024 in the next election?
I'm excited to see who's going to run, actually.
As of right now, no.
I would probably vote first for somebody else.
Right now, I'd probably be looking at different candidates.
I feel like for the past two elections, 2016 and 2020, it's not who's the best, it's who's the least bad. I would like a who's the best election for once, you know?
Thank you, man in the robe.
I gotta say,
spoke sense. I liked it.
You and I talked about this before. Did you see that little drone
Yeah,
go
it's
riding by?
yeah,
Whatever that was. You and I talked about this before the show came on. This is the first one of these I think we've ever shown, these man on the street college interviews, where for the first time they've interviewed a majority of men. I mean, I cannot remember in many, like the 4th of July one and the American flag one we've done recently, almost exclusively women. It's very interesting, number one. Number two, the other thing I think is kind of interesting about it, I don't know if this is an accident, I don't know what it means, but in the ones we've seen before, the questions asked to the kids were also gotcha questions, right? All right. If do you like living in the United States? You get a lot of young women saying no, and then boom comes the trick, right? Well, where would you rather live? Well, I never thought about that. Here, I don't know what it has, if any of this has to do with gender at all, but here it's very interesting is right from the get-go, especially the men, who are most of what we were interviewing, nope, not liking them, not buying them, which is kind of remarkable. Because that many men on a college, there's only one comment that I thought was interesting. One kid said, we're definitely not better than we were 2 years ago. And so I assume that kid was probably a Trump voter. But you could tell a lot of the guys, the one guy put his hand on his head and says, we've got to be patient with him. Why? It's just an interesting. Look, this may have nothing to do with anything, but of all the ones of these that we've shown, this is clearly very different, and the responses seem to be very different for whatever reason.
What's clear from this is they're not lockstep with Biden, but I don't know that we're not getting into political speak too much here, but from the get-go, it's not everyone was excited about Biden. They had all their other ponies they were going for, and then it became down to it's Trump, which none of them want, versus just whoever else they can get.
But the demographic we have seen again and again and again that was most adamantly pro-Biden and anti-Trump, pro-Biden, not just tolerating Biden, was college kids. They more than anybody else in what we have seen have kind of bought into the cultic idea of Biden just because he's not Trump. I mean, to me, for whatever reason, and like you said, maybe it's just selective editing, but these responses on campus seem less college-like, less predictably collegiate than all the other ones we've seen before.
Well, the guy was wearing a robe. What do you want from him? It's not going to be as collegiate.
Back at you with another Instant Classics, and we're reveling in the work of visually stunning work of Marc Chagall. And just a reminder that Chagall was born in 1887, had a nice long life, almost 100 years. He was a Russian-French Jew of Belarusian, white Russian Jewish origins. He was an early modernist painter. He was conceptually very interesting. Everybody from Picasso on down said he was one of the great masters of color and how to use color to promote emotion, to promote ideas and feelings of the 20th century. And take a look at this picture, which is one of his most famous and one of my famous paintings of Chagall in general. It's called The White Crucifixion. And there it is. You get a neat view of it. For a Jewish painter, the crucifixion really, really, really made an impression on Chagall. He painted numerous versions with different significances. And again, there doesn't seem to be any overt hostility to this idea. It doesn't seem to be that as a serious practicing Jewish person, at least in the early part of his life, there doesn't seem to be any resentment or anger at the image would become the central image of Christianity, which of course broke out of the Jewish faith. This painting is, again, called The White Crucifixion. It was painted in 1938. It represents a critical turning point for the artist Marc Chagall. It was the first of an important series of paintings, of compositions, that feature the image of Christ as a Jewish martyr, not necessarily the Son of God. And that's the adjustment he makes. This doesn't seem to be necessarily a reinforcement of Christian theology, certainly not. But the idea of the Jew, the Jewish man as a martyr, fits very nicely into what was going on in 1938 in Stalinist Russia. These paintings show the suffering of Jews and Jesus himself. Violent conflicts are depicted, such as the setting on fire of synagogues in these pictures of crucifixions. In the center of this picture, Jesus is displayed, crucified and symbolized as being Jewish adorned with a prayer shawl instead of a loincloth. So he's wearing a garment that would have been especially significant to the Jews and the rabbis in general. And so, again, Jesus becomes an everyman here. The idea of Jesus is universal, but given a slightly Jewish twist here, given the pogroms that were beginning to get a lot worse. Of course, 1938, the Holocaust was well underway. Whether Chagall knew that or not, at that early a date is probably unlikely, but certainly the rounding up of Jews, Kristallnacht, the expulsion of Jews, both by the Soviets and the Nazis, were all sorts of reasons to suggest that something much, much worse was coming down the road, of which Christ and his imminent suffering might be a very, very useful parallel for an artist like Chagall. So the White Crucifixion revealed in him a very nostalgic view of late medieval, early Renaissance Italian art as well. Oftentimes very interested in color, too. It's interesting that in the White Crucifixion, the emphasis tends to be more on colorlessness for a variety of reasons.
Oakley dokley, those are today's stories. If you have a question for us, please feel free to drop it into the mailbag by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Dr. Katie. One day, maybe. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.